your very, very busy schedules, I am sure, to join us on this webinar. We're going to get started in about 3 minutes. Today we're talking about sermon evaluation, so get ready for that. Get pens, get your notebooks out, notepad on your phone, whatever it is. Just get ready to take some notes. But first things first is we want to make sure that you can see us and you can hear us. We're going to be bouncing back and forth between us being on camera and some slides that you're going to go through. So if you see it, Aaron, is it a chat stream? Is it a chat box? How is it labeled exactly on what they're looking at?
It just says chat.
Okay, it's just chat. That's it, chat. Mm-hmm. So if you want to chat, we would love for you to chat. We say we'd love for this to be a dialogue, not a monologue. So click in the chat area and just let us know where you're from. How about that? Just let us know where you're from. And if you want to add something else to that, just let us know what the weather is like today. What is the weather like today in Pennsylvania? Okay, I'm just curious about that. So say hello, let us know where you're from, what the weather looks like. We have Jeff Henderson joining us today. I don't know, Aaron, can they see Jeff yet?
Yes, they can.
Yes, Jeff.
Everybody.
Oh, we can hear him too, yes.
I'm the older, not as good-looking one.
Wow.
But good to be with you guys.
Yeah, Jeff, we appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule as well to just invest in communication, all of our communication styles.
Ben, the weather in the other room from you is about the same as where you are.
Yeah. Weather in Georgia today, by the way, is beautiful. It's sunny and about, I don't know, what would you say, 87, 88 degrees?
Yeah, it feels like 150.
Yes. Well, compared to literally, I think it was about 150 a couple days ago. It feels like fall to me. But again, we'll let you guys know we're going to get started in about 1 minute. So, Aaron, that chat stream, are people letting us know they can see, they can hear? You guys let us know that the technology's coming through clear?
Yep. We have a ton of people. Sunny in Chicago, in case you were wondering.
Ooh, I like Chicago.
Yeah. And Lancaster. I learned that it's Lancaster and not Lancaster.
Yep.
So that was good. And the weather there is sweet.
Sweet.
Deacon Marion's asking who's the handsome woman, so it's not you or me, Ben.
It's not.
Oh.
So yeah, you guys know Erin. Erin's a part of our team, and she's going to be navigating that chat stream. And unfortunately, we don't have time to, like, on air, Jeff or I answer every question that gets in that chat stream. But throughout this training, you know, some questions come to mind. Type them in there. Our team will be trying to answer them. Some of you can answer questions for each other, and then some of those questions Aaron's going to read out loud so that Jeff and I will kind of give the best answer that we can.
That's right.
So again, we love the idea of this, you know, not just being, you know, talking heads or looking at some slides. We love the idea of us, you guys interacting with us and you guys interacting with each other. So at any point along the way, you want to start a dialogue or you want to ask a question, jump in that chat stream. We'll do our best to get to it. Or again, you guys give some answers to each other. That's the great part of what Jeff encourages is pastors helping other pastors. So Aaron, I want to go full screen with the slides if we can right now. And let me know when that's there, when we are full screen with the slides, because I want to walk through a little bit of information that pertains to today and what we're talking about. You got it yet? You got it? All right, yes, that's good. Today we are talking about the art of evaluating your sermons. So getting better, all of that we want to improve as communicators. Are there some practical, systematic, strategic ways that we can evaluate and improve our sermons? And really today, I think, is about how to get better without beating yourself up. And so often, I know for me, all I knew was that I needed to get better because I was so terrible. And that's not the focus today. We're not talking about how bad some of the things that you have been doing are. None of that at all. We're just talking through some ways that you can just take some steps or little steps in the right direction. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Ben Crawshaw. I started preaching in 1998. way before I had any business preaching at all to anybody. So I got thrown into it. I wasn't looking for it. I didn't ask for it. It fell on my lap, and I had no choice. Started communicating in 1998, and I'm passionate about helping communicators. I'm passionate about church leaders, particularly at small churches, and I'm passionate about helping communicators. And I work a lot with student pastors who communicate week after week and have learned just about, the grind that week after week can represent. And so my goal and our goal today is that we want all of us to get some practical tools on how to strategically evaluate our sermons. And I'll talk about how I used to kind of non-strategically evaluate it in just a minute. But I also want all of us to move from this sense of insecurity and confusion to clarity and confidence. And a lot of times what we have is a little mix of both, and sure, that's some insecurity, some confusion. It's going to be part of the process of, putting yourself out there, being vulnerable, communicating this incredible message week after week. But if we can move to some more clarity and confidence and get out of just the cycle of the insecurity that all of us feel who are communicators, that's part of our goal today. And I just want to let you know, if you stay until the very end, so you hang out with us, we're going to be here, right at an hour. If you hang out to the very end, I'm going to talk about the number one habit I've established to help me self-evaluate. And this is what I tell communicators all the time. What I'm going to tell you at the end, especially when I'm working with student pastors or people who communicate to student audiences or are just getting started, this is the number one habit I've established to help me self-evaluate and improve along the way. Now, from what I've experienced, and this is not the case, all the time, but in most cases, most preaching trainings, they talk about what preachers need to know, not how they can improve. Most preaching trainings are delivered by someone who, the reason they're giving that training is because they are an expert in their area, and they just give a lot of information, which is great. That's incredible. It's teaching, coaching, training, but not so much, hey, here's some practical ways that you can improve. And, hey, we all want to learn, and there's great, books and blogs, and many of you, went to school just to study preaching the Word of God, but we also want to know, hey, how can we practically improve? And most preaching trainings that I've seen don't talk about that, and I think they neglect what I've seen is a major fact, and that's this. Preaching every week is hard. It's just hard. I mean, no matter how eloquent you are when you give a preaching training, just knowing that every week, man, that's difficult. And then getting better, that's even harder. Man, when I started in ministry, when I first began to learn that how much of a grind and how difficult it was to just muscle up energy and the preparation time week after week, how difficult that was. And then on top of all of that, like I'm supposed to improve and get better. That's even more difficult, and we have all of that in mind today as we talk about this. In fact, just to put your mind at ease a little bit, and let you know that the evaluation process isn't as complicated as we often think. We often think, well, how am I going to do this? Who am I going to involve? What's the process? It's overwhelming in our head. It's not as complicated as we think. Just actually doing it is the hardest step. Jeff will allude to that. Just actually stepping out and doing it, evaluating, and even getting help and feedback from other people, that's the hardest step. And see, I used to self-evaluate based on my emotions and one or two comments afterwards from attenders. So that was the way I decided, how that talk, how the sermon went, how my communication was doing, was how I felt. And then, I would hear a couple people say some stuff, and then I would base it on that. The problem is that I am my biggest critic, so my emotions were almost always negative. And I always heard from the same one or two people that they liked me, and so they were saying the same things. And so it wasn't accurate. It was emotional, and it was based on one or two people. It wasn't an accurate way to evaluate or certainly to improve. And so over time, here's what I discovered. I've discovered that there's a big difference between how I feel and how I can improve. That practically knowing how I can get better, and then the emotions that just come with preaching. There's the difficult emotions. All pastors I've talked to, it's the insecurity, it's feeling drained, it's battling burnout, it's the exhaustion, it's I don't feel like people are responding. All those emotions, there's a difference between that and how we can improve. Also this, I realized that I was too insecure to truly open myself up to evaluation, which ironically would help me feel more confident in my preaching. You know, one of the things that would help my insecurity, I was too insecure to do. Isn't it funny how we work like that? So here's what I've seen about preaching, and then I'll turn it over to Jeff in just a minute from here. The weight of it shouldn't be on my shoulders, because it's, after all, it's the grace of God and his movement through me on behalf of people he loves. This is not about me, about us, about what we do. It's about the grace of God moving through us. But I've learned that God also moves out of his grace through practices and methods and advice and insight that helps me improve. The grace of God out of his love for the people I preach to works in that way as well. So we're going to talk about the art of evaluating your sermons today, and this is going to be led by Jeff. A few things about Jeff. Jeff's the pastor of Gwinnett Church and does an incredible job, not just leading the congregation and group of people, but also raising up communicators around him, young guys or people on staff or people who are, in some other vocation and are now in ministry and working with them on their communication. He's the creator of Preaching Rocket, which is a system that's helped, hundreds, if not thousands, of pastors just improve in their preaching. And the reason Preaching Rocket was created is because Jeff already had a couple decades of experience coaching communicators. And we just said, hey, let's find a way to get that out to more people in a more inexpensive way. And digital, that was the way to do that. And so that's Jeff, and he's going to be talking in a minute. Before he does, 2 quick notes. Number one, if you can, put your phones on silent, and you may not be able to do that. That's fine. It's not like we can hear your phones ringing. It's just a way to help you focus. Remove as many of the distractions as you can so that during this time we have together, you can really hone in and focus. And then again, a reminder that we have a chat box where you can type in your questions, and we will answer as many of those as we can along the way. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff from here. And Jeff, thank you again for taking time out of your schedule to come work with us on our communication.
Ben, that was awesome. Watching, I think it was Joel that said I'm feverishly trying to take notes, and that was fantastic. So, and I agree. So that's worth actually just being here for the webcast right now. But as Ben said, preaching is very, very personal, and you're going to get feedback whether you want it or not. And so one of the things we say at Preaching Rocket is you don't have to listen to everyone, but you do have to listen to someone. You don't have to listen to everyone, but you do have to listen to someone. So sermon evaluation sometimes drives people out of ministry, and so we want to avoid that. As you know, Mondays are the #1 days that when pastors or preachers resign. And a lot of that has to do with things didn't go well on Sunday, didn't feel like the sermon went well. And so sometimes we run from sermon evaluation and just kind of put our head down. That doesn't help. Sometimes we take it way too personally and it's not helpful at all, and that doesn't help. So what we're going to talk about today is a process that you can use, and it's a very simple process that I think is a very positive process, a very constructive process, and something that you can begin doing the next time you preach. So if it's tonight at you've got an event tonight at your church, or it's this coming Sunday, or whether it's with high school students, middle school students, whatever it may be, you can implement this process very, very quickly and very, very briefly. Now, before I tell you what kind of we're going to give you 3 buckets, if you will, to kind of look at and evaluate your sermon. We're going to do something that we've never done before, and I'm kind of calling this game film. And if you're a football fan, I think, James, I think you asked about the Falcons. We've built more stadiums in Atlanta than we have Super Bowl championships, by the way, so I have no idea how the Falcons are going to do. I don't have a whole lot of hope. But if you're a football fan, or really a sports fan, they put game film up, and you look at the game film, and then you evaluate it, and it's not just your position, it's the whole team. So we're going to watch some game film today. We've selected 5, I believe, 5, maybe 6 pastors. You submitted your videos to us, and I went and just randomly selected a few, and then we're going to show a few minutes of these sermons, and then I'm going to come back and use the process that we're going to teach you to use. Now, if your sermon wasn't selected for this, no worries. I think if this goes well, we're going to continue to do this in maybe a different format. The response we got on this of sending your messages in was phenomenal, And some of you actually sent us the outlines, which was awesome. But if possible, I would love for you for the future if you could send us a video link. And some of you sent it through YouTube, and YouTube's restricted. So Haley Hand, who's on this webcast somewhere, did a lot of good work to pull the ones that are on YouTube. Or if you could just put it on Vimeo and make sure it's public, then we can take it and show it during our next game film. So that's kind of where we're going today. Before that happens, let me show you the 3 filters or the 3 buckets that we're going to do. And this is very, very simple, but Aaron will click onto the slide. And so basically these are kind of the 3 buckets, if you will, of how to evaluate your sermons. And so this is what I would do with someone on my staff, as Ben mentioned. We would talk about first what went well. Hey, what went well? And this is the opportunity for you for the team to be encouraging. If you're the one evaluating and giving the feedback, you start with what went well, and then you talk about suggestions for improvement. I like this title versus what went wrong. Okay, what went well and what went wrong. What went well is good. What went wrong is a little negative. So here are some suggestions for improvement. Here's some things, particularly if you've got more than one service. If you've got more than one service, then you can say, hey, for the next service, here's some suggestions for improvement. So that's kind of an immediate takeaway. And then there's one practical takeaway. Now, what's the difference between the one practical takeaway and the suggestions for improvement? The one practical takeaway might be something that you want to do long term. Hey, you're not looking at the audience as much as you need to be, or you're talking way too slow, or you're not beginning in the right process. You're not transitioning to the conclusion in the right way. So the one practical takeaway might be something that you can implement from every message going forward. So what went well, suggestions for improvement, and one practical takeaway. So this is a process that I use to evaluate all of our communicators, both right after the service. We have 3 services at Gwinnett Church, so if it's the first service, I would go in. If someone was speaking live at our campus, or my team would come in and go, hey, here's what went well, here's some suggestions for improvement, and you know what, long term, here's one practical takeaway for the long term. So that said, what we're going to do is I'm actually going to flip it to the game film, and we're going to actually show you some sermons. We're not the whole sermons. We've got about from everywhere from 3 to 5 to a little bit longer than that, but they're just short snippets of the sermon. And so what we're going to do is we're going to show you these, then I'm going to come back and evaluate the sermons. Now, if you're one of the 5 that we selected, thanks again for doing this, and they were fantastic. I've also got some suggestions, and I also have a practical takeaway. So we're just going to pretend that for a moment you work for Gwinnett Church or Preaching Rocket, and I get to serve with you. And then as I watched your sermon, here's what my thoughts. Now, if your sermon isn't selected, hey, we're going to continue to do this. If the feedback is good. If it's not, then I'll never do this again. I'm just kidding. So we're going to start first with Andrew Chang. Andrew is at 10th Church, and we're going to go into right at the beginning of his message, and then after this short video clip is over, there's going to be about a 15-second delay. So I'm going to wait for 15 seconds, and then we'll start talking again, and then we'll go from there. That sound good? All right. Here's Andrew. Well, that was Andrew, and a fantastic job, Andrew. So if you're watching, or if your mom is watching, hey, your son did a great job. So let me tell you, let's start with what went well. And I've just written some notes, Andrew. First of all, this is right at the beginning of your message. I thought it was a fantastic connection. And you're very warm, very engaging, and you went right to this great personal story. It was a fantastic story. You told it well. You're a really good storyteller. And there's also what we talk about in Preaching Rocket is there needs to be a likability factor, and you have that. And the reason likability is so important is we don't listen or trust people that we don't like. We don't listen to or we don't trust people we don't like. And we don't want to. We're not suggesting pandering to people, but we do want people to be able to relate to us. So when you told the story, being in the playground, and you weren't the hero of the story, someone else was the hero of the story, and that was a very personal story to you. People laughed when you made the comment about today's playgrounds, we build them so no one will sue us. There's a lot of humor, and humor is really, really, really important. Scott said, I didn't say lackability, likability. That's my southern accent there. So Andrew, I thought the first part of that was fantastic. So that's what went really, really well. Here's a suggestion for improvement. So you had this question, which is, how many of you have felt this way, which is a fantastic question, and then you went right into the text. What I would have done is I would have teased that moment out some more. I would have said, how many of you have felt this way? And then start bringing out different areas in life that people can relate to. And you take your story about being afraid in the playground and you take that and you parallel it to other areas in life. I feel like you went a little bit too soon to the text. And I love the question, how many of you have felt this way? And then I would just have teased that out some more. So I would have loved for about 3 more minutes of you just connecting with different examples in life so that you can try to connect with as many people as possible. So because the story was so great, the setup was so great, and the question is so great, I would just bring up more examples before you go into the text. And so when you kind of tease that out and bring some more of the examples out, then you can go, hey, the Bible actually has something to say about this. In fact, we're going to look at a story today that actually connects to all of these stories. And so you're building what we call tension. You're building interest into what the text says. So that would be a suggestion for improvement. And then a practical takeaway or suggestion is this. I noticed that you looked at your notes a little bit, and no problem with that. But I wondered in the next time, could you do a talk without having your notes there? And that might be a challenge. And from a personal standpoint, hey, what if you went up there with no notes? And that's one of the things we teach in Preaching Rocket is to go up there and have you can see what we call designing the message and just getting away from the notes so that you don't have to look at it. Because sometimes, and I'm not saying this is what happened, but sometimes when you look at the notes, you take your eyes off the audience and you kind of, you go, okay, where am I? So that would just be one practical takeaway. Hey, could you do it without the notes? But it wasn't a huge deal. Just something to think about. So great connection, great personal story, great likability, not lackability, and then could you tease out with some more examples before going into the text? And could you do the next message with no notes? So Andrew, fantastic job. Now we're going to go to Armando DeNega from Chase Oaks Church, and this is a fantastic introduction as well. So watch Armando. How awesome was that? I'm kind of agreeing with my man Jeff here. How about we skip the eval and watch the whole thing? Armando, you were fantastic. You were amazing. So what went well? Suggestions for improvement. One practical takeaway. Um, so many things went well in that introduction. First of all, the Spanish introduction was absolutely brilliant. It just had, you got everyone's attention. You went long enough to go, is this all going to be in Spanish? And then pause. That was fantastic. So that was, can't say enough about that. Great humor. The Ricky Ricardo line was fantastic. I love that as well. So immediately, in terms of people liking you, we like you, we're with you, you instantly have us there. The other thing I loved about the Ricky, of course, in the Antonio Banderas line was great too. But you took Ricky Ricardo and you said, hey, I have something in common with Ricky Ricardo. What a great transition statement to go into your story. We were both immigrants. So that was just a smooth transition from the Spanish introduction to the Ricky Ricardo line to, hey, we have something in common. You're taking us on a journey, and we're just following you. In fact, you can see this. Joel's actually saying he's going to do his intro in Spanish this Sunday. That would be fantastic. So other things that went well, I put great energy, great facial expressions. You smiled. Smiling is so important. And again, strong likability. So I can't say enough about how fantastic your introduction was. And it's one suggestion for improvement on this, and it was kind of hard to find one, honestly, but you had your transition to reconciliation, which was another great transition. But again, I wonder if you could pause that a little bit and talk about, we've been in this series about reconciliation, and let's talk about that. You had that great line from John Maxwell, and talk about maybe you need to be reconciled with a parent, or maybe it's not a parent, maybe it's a brother, or maybe it's a coworker, or maybe it's somebody in this room. Who do you need to be reconciled with? And bring it really personal. And you may have done that at the other part of the message, but trying to make that point, really hone in really personal on that. And then one practical suggestion for the next time: if you'll notice when you watch, you talk to the left side of the room and the right side of the room, but rarely did you talk to the middle of the room. And I do this all the time, and I have to kind of force myself, talk to the middle of the room, because as communicators, we're trying to make sure we bring the people, far away in, but make sure that we don't miss these people right here. So if you watch it again, and for the next time, I would suggest you still talk to the people here, but make sure you kind of hone in. And one of the things I try to do is actually find people in the crowd. Oh, there's a lady in a green shirt. There's a guy in a red shirt. And I'm just going to talk to them. And as I talk to them, I'm talking to everyone in the center. So it's basically zones. And you know this: zone here, zone there, and a zone here. But that's a small suggestion. But I think it would help bring these people in a little bit closer in terms of just feeling a part of the talk. But fantastic, great introduction. That transition and transitions are so hard, but so important. And it was a good transition. I'm just saying, much like I suggested with Andrew, could you kind of tease it out a little bit more and make it a little bit more personal? But that was fantastic. So now we're going to go to Monty Walden at Fellowship Bible Church. This is an introduction as well, and this is Monty's 4 minutes into his talk. So check this out. All right. So that was Monty Walden at Fellowship Bible Church. And Monty, I thought you did a fantastic job as well. And so let me give you what went well, some suggestions for improvement, and one practical suggestion and takeaway for you the next time. Great introduction. I loved it. It was a fantastic analogy with nitroglycerin. So that was great. And I love the fact that we didn't really know where you were going. We knew that we all familiar with this. Maybe not as familiar with the history of the story, but we all have heard about nitroglycerin. And so, when you introduced it, we were all with you. Great introduction, and it was a great analogy. And then when you connected it to judgment, that was fantastic. I just love that. So it was a great setup. I felt like you had a great connection with the crowd. So you kind of had some interaction with the crowd. And one of the things we talk about in Preaching Rocket is to make sure that you try to shrink the gap. In other words, there's a gap between you and the crowd. And so I love the way that you had some interaction with the crowd, and you just, you shrunk that gap, and people were with you the whole way. So that took 4 minutes. So you did a lot in 4 minutes, which is absolutely fantastic. You had a great engaging story. You connected with the crowd. You shrunk the gap, and so they're with you. You had this great story, and then it easily set up the tension of what you were going to, and you even gave a statistic about judgment. So there was a lot of what you did in just 4 minutes. It was absolutely fantastic. So, job well done. Here's a suggestion for improvement, and this may be just who you were talking to, but it sounded as if you were only speaking to Christians. And I wonder if you could kind of broaden that and say, hey, you may be here today and you might not be a Christian, and maybe the reason is because there was a Christian that judged you and you haven't been back in church ever since. Now, you might say, well, Jeff, there are only Christians in my church. But one of the things that if you'll start to talk as if non-Christians are in the room, it'll create a welcoming environment, I believe, so that they can come on in. Or it will let the people that you're speaking to know that they should be bringing and reaching out to non-Christians and bringing them in. So a practical suggestion for that suggestion is talk to those who aren't believers as if they're in the room. Because you might say, well, Jeff, there are no other Christians in the room. They're all Christians here. But talk to the room as if there are non-believers in the room. And I think, particularly with the message that you were talking about judgment, which is such a fantastic message, and again, you set it up so incredibly well. If you were to just say, hey, you might be here today and you might not be a follower of Jesus, and first of all, we're glad you're here, but this might be your story. This might be the very thing that people used on you, and you haven't been back in church ever since. And so today we're going to talk about how devastating it can be, but what Jesus has to say about it. So that would be my suggestion. Talk to those who aren't believers as if they're in the room, even if they're not. So great introduction, great analogy, great great connection with the crowd. Try to broaden the scope of who you're talking to, and try to talk to the room as if non-believers are actually there. So Monty, fantastic job. So 2 more for our first ever game film that we're doing. So I hope you're enjoying this. We're going to go to Rockford First Church. We're going to dive into the middle part of the message, and this is Lisa Seton from Rockford First Church. So check out Lisa's message. All right, that was Lisa Seton from Rockford First Church. And Lisa, fantastic job. And let me just dive into what went well. Make sure we're all synced up now. Loved your story. That was great about misquoting the verse. And again, we've talked about all of these today. There's just a likability factor. The other three guys we had, I like him. With this, I like her. She's funny. And the other thing is, it was self-deprecating. Okay, this didn't make you the hero of the story. Okay, this is just something that you made a mistake. That kind of stuff where you're not the hero of the story, but you're being honest and open and vulnerable. That's great. So instantly, and again, we talked about this earlier. Humor. It's fantastic. So. Great intro to let people know who you are, first-time guest. I was on this trip, no Starbucks, all that's really helpful to know. Okay, she likes Starbucks. She was on this mission trip, and she misquoted the verse. Went from there. So I thought that was great. Then I felt like you had a good transition from the story into the series. Okay, so we've been in the series, and here's what the series has been about. And if you haven't been tracking along, and you made a reference in terms of if you haven't been tracking along, you can check it out in the bulletin. And so you brought everyone on board. There was humor, likability. You introed the series, and I just felt like that was fantastic. So great job. Suggestion for improvement on this particular talk would be to transition into the Proverbs verse. And we immediately go into talking about wisdom, which is fantastic. That's what the message is about. But I wonder if you would pause and go, now, we're talking about wisdom, but how would you define wisdom? And I know a lot of people who would pause and go, just turn to the person next to you and say, what do you think wisdom is? Is it high IQ? Is it this or that? And just trying to bring everybody on board, and so that we can all agree, what is wisdom? What is that? You went into why we needed wisdom, which was fantastic when you said, hey, how many of you would say you would like more wisdom? But I would just make sure that we're all talking about the same thing, because wisdom could be defined in different ways. So that's a small thing, but that would be something. If you were doing the next service on this particular talk, I would say, hey, let's try to define wisdom for everyone, and then we'll kind of go from there. Because I think the point of your talk was you really need to have wisdom, which was a fantastic point, and that's where you were going with the talk. But that's just one thing I would add. And then one practical takeaway is, you've got the screen up there. My suggestion or practical takeaway would be, do you need the podium? It seemed to me like the podium kind of got in the way sometimes. And I sometimes, especially when I help coach business presenters, they like to have a podium. And what I tell them is the podium is a barrier between them and the audience. And so I felt like it kind of distracted a little bit. So, and I know you had your notes on it, but with the screen up there, and maybe if there's a preview screen out there, that could help you see what's coming next. I would suggest taking the podium and removing it for your next talk so that you can just be right there with the crowd. So it might seem like a little thing, but I think it might be less distracting for the audience and for you to kind of take that away and just be right there in front of the audience. But that said, fantastic job. Loved it. Great humor. Great story. And great intro into where you were going. Final one for the day, we're going to go with Herman at Square One Church. So we'll show Sammer's talk, then we'll come back and close it up. All right, that was Sammer from Square One Church. Make sure we're all back on. I think we are now. So what went well, suggestions for improvement, and one practical takeaway. Sammer, I thought great way to begin by engaging the crowd by saying, hey, we're a church. If I say, how are you doing? And if you're not doing okay, you can say, I'm not doing okay. We're a church. I thought that was your vision casting for the church. So I thought that was great. You did a great job recapping the series. I loved it. And then you moved into jealousy. And the definition of jealousy was fantastic. The question, why not me? That was brilliant. Just loved it, loved it, loved it. And not only that, you know that you're engaging and the crowd's with you when they start repeating the question. And I love how you did this, and it just kind of you just kind of did it naturally. And then, you know, as it built, as you began to continue to build it up, the church started saying, why not me? And that was a sign that you had connected with everyone in the room. If they're Jesus follower or not, everybody was going, oh, I've been there, and I've been on social media, and I go, yeah, they just went on vacation for the 12th time. Why not me? Why not me? So that was fantastic. I love how you just define jealousy, and it was just a great connecting point. And I love how you said this. You said, if I asked you, are you jealous? None of us would raise our hands. But if I asked you, have you asked this question, why not me? I think everybody would raise their hands. That was fantastic. So the way you set it up brought us all in, and you left us or got us to the point of going, we want more, we want more. So that was absolutely fantastic. Here's a couple of suggestions for improvement. On the story of the business owner, I wonder if you could have taken that story. It was a fun story, but I wonder if you could move it to the end. Because I think you've got us so far. At this point, I think you could go straight into the text. And I wonder if the story of the business owner was a great story, but maybe it was a little bit too much. Since you already have us and everybody's nodding, going, why not me? Then at that point, you could say, you know, the Bible has something to say about jealousy and the antidote to jealousy and kind of where you were going, and then go into the text at that point. So maybe either delete the business story, the business owner story, or move it to the middle or the end section. Just a suggestion. I thought it was a great story. But set up the Bible as being the answer to this issue. And many people are skeptical of the Bible, all of that. I mean, you can show that it has relevance to their lives, and because we're going to talk about something that has relevance, which is jealousy. It's relevant. We've all said that. We've all said, why not me? So that's just one takeaway. Could you take that story and move it to another part? And then one practical suggestion, and it's been mentioned here on the chat room. I wonder if you could do something with the background. I know the fire alarm in the background, it was when you moved, it was a little bit, you could see it, and it can be distracting. I wonder if you put a little bit more curtains back there to stop seeing the cars running the distance. And you might think, well, Jeff, that's just such a minor thing, and it is a minor thing. But anytime somebody is distracting for a second, you can lose them. So I wonder if there's a way to do something with your backdrop. And I wonder again if there's a way that you can preach without the notes, or maybe have them to the side, because right now it's a barrier between you and the people there. But those are some minor things. All that said, I thought that was fantastic. So we're about 5 minutes over, and so I'm going to turn it over to Erin. And Erin, where do we need to go?
Yeah, I'm going to ask a few questions. We've had a lot, so I'm just going to try and grab the ones that have been repeated.
Okay.
When asked that she doesn't always have time or a person that she can ping some sermons off of on Sunday, so would you recommend recording it and watching it themselves before Sunday, or what would you suggest?
Absolutely. That may actually be, especially if you don't have anybody, I would do that. And just so you know, I hate watching myself give a talk, and I hate hearing myself give a talk, but as my boss, Andy Stanley, says, it's the number one way that you get better, by evaluating and seeing and watching yourself. So that's the great thing about having these little devices nowadays, is I think you could go through, run through, and watch it. And so I would highly, highly encourage, especially if you don't have anybody that you can bounce this off of, Just watch it yourself, and you will be able to evaluate. And I think you just evaluate with those 3 buckets: what went well, some suggestions for improvement, and what's one practical takeaway for when you really actually do it. So great question.
Awesome. So when you do have someone that can evaluate, would you recommend it be a team of people, or do you just want an opinion of one person?
Great question. I think it depends on finding one of these categories. There are friends who are going to be so encouraging that they won't tell you the truth. There are going to be foes who will email you or send you anonymous anonymous letters in the mail. I'm sorry, there's fans, foes, and then the friends. And the friends are the people that are going to be really, really honest with you. And so who loves you enough, who will be really honest with you, who loves you enough, who will also encourage you, and also people that have a knack for this. There may be people who have a knack for evaluation and not actually doing it themselves. It's like a coach, right? I mean, there are coaches who can't play the sport that well, but they sure can coach the sport. So if there are people in the business community that they either present or they evaluate presenters, bringing them in, but if they've got a knack for this, and if you can find more than one, that would be great. But if you can only find one friend with a knack for evaluation, I'd find that person. So that's what I would try to do. If you can find a few friends like this, great. If you can only find one, then find one that can help you. That's what I would do.
Great. Chad had a question. He says when he gives a healthy pause, he always feels like everyone thinks that he forgot his place. Any tips on creating confidence in that pause?
Yeah, I think that's so hard, and I don't do this very well myself, but I think pausing and smiling and then just looking around, and then you could say maybe a follow-up line, isn't that true? Isn't that true? Don't you feel that? And so I think, just shaking your head and try, what can help is eye contact. So if you pause and kind of look up in the ceiling, so that may think, hey, I think he or they've lost their train of thought. But if you smile and you're nodding and you're making eye contact, people are going to kind of lean in. So eye contact is really key in terms of those pauses. And then finding strategic pauses. You don't want to do this all the time, but in those moments when this is the point. So for Sammer, it would be, if you've ever asked the question, why not me? You ever asked that question? Look around, pause. So in those moments, when you're leveraging the point and the moment and with eye contact, that'll really help.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question. Let's see. If they do use notes printed or the iPad, which is less distracting in your mind? And then we've had a lot of people asking about having like a podium or something to place them on if that's too distracting as well. Any thoughts on that?
Well, again, this is personal preference, so I don't think there's a right or wrong, okay? I don't think there's a right or wrong. So I can just tell you my preference, and my preference would be to preach with no notes and just to internalize it. And that's what we teach at Preaching Rocket, is to design the message in your mind so that when you go up, you're actually seeing the message, not word by word, but we give you a picture of it, and you follow along in that picture. And for me, I would want them, when I coach people, I say I want them to go, how did she memorize all this? Oh, I think she actually believes it. She's internalized it. And now it's a challenge if you're preaching a lot. That's why preparation is so important. But if you've got to have notes, I think whatever helps you the best. One of the things that we use, and you may not be in a position to do this, is a preview screen so that you can see what's coming here. And that's been quite a gift for those of us that communicate in North Point Ministries world, because that helps us figure out where we're going next. So for me, in terms of communication, what's most important isn't what I'm currently saying in notes, it's what I'm about to say. And again, that's why preparation helps. So for me personally, I would like to go up there with as few, as little notes as possible. And it took me a long time to get to that comfort level. I'd always, have something like a file folder in case I forget. And I remember the first time I said, no, I'm going to go up there with no notes. And I just felt like I owned it more. So, but again, that's a personal preference. My concern is when you take your eye off the crowd consistently and look at your notes, it can be a little distracting. But again, that's just a personal preference.
So, Jeff, I'm going to jump in real quickly and ask you a question. Do you feel like people who help you evaluate your sermons also need to be communicators themselves, or is it possible to get evaluation help from people who are not communicators?
Absolutely. I've got people that help me evaluate, and they would not want to do this. They don't want to get up on the stage, but they know content, they know transitions, they're great writers, they're great idea people, they know the Bible well. So, but they would say, hey, I'm a coach. I'm not a, if you use the analogy, I'm a coach, I'm not a player. So I'm not going to play on the field, but I can help coach. And these are people that I've worked with before who are great at content development, content transition, and then can just let me know what they're experiencing as a listener to the talk as well. So we had a friend of yours in mind, Ben, Lauren Espy. She just did her first message at our church recently, and she got a group of people in there, and a few of them will never talk because they don't want to do this. But the reason she had them in here, in that room, she did a practice talk, is because they're great at understanding content, they're great at understanding transitions, and they're just great at being a coach. So if you can find those people, it's very helpful.
That's great, and you guys have asked some incredible questions and put some incredible questions in the chat stream. We're going to see somehow if we can get back around to some of those, but first I'm going to jump in. I'm going to ask you a question. Again, you guys have asked great questions. I'm going to return now and ask you a question, and it's simply this: would you like to improve in all areas of your preaching? Now, of course, we laugh because, of course, we'd all say we would, yes, like to improve in all areas of our preaching. Everybody feels this tension that we've talked about of how to get better. Hey, how to get as good as the people that Jeff has shown game film of, incredible communicators. How do we improve to their level? That's a great question. In this past hour and 15 minutes, we've covered a lot, but there's so much more to talk about, and even if we had all day, if we had all week, we couldn't cover everything. We just couldn't. And what you need is more than just a training. A training. We're going to look at some game film. As helpful as that has been, you need resources. You need coaching. You need accountability. Otherwise, we go to a training, we learn some great stuff, and we say, yeah, I'm going to put that into practice. And then we go, and what happens? Life happens. You get wrapped up in all the other things that you do, and it was like, oh yeah, what were those 3 things? Those were 3 good ideas. We need more than just training. We need more than just hearing something and seeing it one time. We need coaching, accountability, and that's why I'm so excited to talk to you today about Preaching Rocket. And Jeff, who created Preaching Rocket, is the one who has walked us through today and looked at the game film to evaluate other communicators. And you may be saying, well, what is Preaching Rocket? Preaching Rocket is a revolutionary step-by-step system designed to take the stress and the worry out of creating powerful sermons each week. Now, Jeff, talk about this. Talk about this step-by-step process, to kind of take the worry away and to create powerful sermons.
Well, we believe the better you preach, the better you prepare, the better you preach. And so what happens is we try to get you just 5 days ahead. That's the first thing we do. And then we try to get you 3 weeks ahead, and then a little bit longer ahead. And then we start to talk about other aspects of preaching, and some of which we talked on today in terms of evaluation. So, but the step-by-step system is designed for this. Our promise is to help make your next sermon your best sermon, and that's all you got to do. Don't try to become someone else overnight. We just need your voice. But the way we do that is we help work on your next sermon. So that's in terms of the practical takeaway, like we talked about today. Hey, could you take the podium away? That might help. Or could you make this transition a little bit better? So in this system, it's just try to make your next sermon your best sermon, and then make your next sermon your best sermon, and we teach you how to get into that process.
Absolutely. And I think for you, when you jump into Preaching Rocket today, I think you're going to not only be encouraged, I think you're going to be thrilled. I mean, some of the stress that'll come off of your shoulders, it's going to feel just incredible by how quickly Preaching Rocket can improve your sermon preparation process, and as we talked about today, the delivery process as well. And I love this, Jeff loves this, that who this has worked for is all types of communicators, so not just senior pastor, people who are communicating in different areas of the church, and people who are communicating outside of the church in the nonprofit space, or you're traveling on behalf of a ministry, churches of all sizes. I mean, we've seen a wide span of churches as far as numbers who have really benefited from Preaching Rocket. Traditional preachers, Jeff works with traditional preachers all the time. Non-traditional preachers, hey, it has helped them immensely, and that's what's been incredible. And so what you're going to get when you jump in today are these 12 modules, of preaching, training, coaching, resources, community, accountability. And you can see from Module 1, how to build a great sermon, all the way down to Module 6, Jeff referred to this today, the crucial first 5 minutes, all the way down to Module 12, the missing ingredient that will change everything. You see the value there, $3,500, Preaching Rocket. Now, how it works is 12 modules of online learning with easy-to-follow video, training much like you've been a part of today, people coaching you on how to improve certain aspects of your preaching, easy-to-follow video, audio, and text-based training to help you create unforgettable sermons week after week. And it has been for, this would be for, say, Pastor number 1, who says, I'm brand new, I want a solid foundation. Preaching Rocket has helped a lot of pastors and communicators who are just getting started. Then you have Pastor 2, I think I've hit a plateau, I kind of feel like I'm stuck. And for me, that's really when Jeff's training and helping communication helped me, is I was like, I think I've hit a plateau, I'm stuck, I need some coaching, I need some training, I need some resources. And then Pastor 3, you may be saying things are going great, but I want to stay fresh and I want to stay strong in my preaching. That's who Preaching Rocket is for. This is Mike from Grace Church. He said this: may you be encouraged that you are helping a pastor in his congregation and the cause with all your work behind the scenes. I have been using the materials about a week and a day. This is 8 days, seven days for the week and one more day. I already notice a difference, and I think the congregation notices too. My wife of many years notices as well. We know this, Jeff, we know this. Our spouses are our biggest fans and sometimes our most honest critics. And he said his encouragement to all of you this week. And so jumping into Preaching Rocket today, there's going to be a bonus. Completely free. It's the Upfront Digital. And Upfront is the 5-step process designed to help presenters make their next presentation their best presentation. Jeff, talk about Upfront really quickly.
Well, many of our church staff will say, I'm not a communicator because I'm not going to preach a message, but yet they're leaders. And leadership eventually comes with a microphone. It may be your middle school leader, nursery leader, preschool leader, whatever it may be, but you're going to have to stand up in front of volunteers and say, here's where we're going today, here's where we're going in our ministry. And that's leadership and it's communication. So Upfront helps people who are not going to be preachers, but they are leaders. It helps them with their communication, because the better we communicate, the better we lead. And so this is a process for senior leaders as well, a developmental tool that they can use to help their leaders become better communicators, but as they become better communicators, they become leaders. So think of this as a staff or volunteer leadership development tool.
Yeah, that's incredible. We're going to throw in another bonus today. We just love rewarding people who jump in, act quickly. 10 new sermon stories. So these are stories to be used as illustrations. We categorize them so you know what the topic is and how this story is going to help enhance that topic that you're preaching on or the text that you're preaching on. We're going to throw those in for you today. So here's what you're going to get today. Preaching Rocket, which is the modules, audio, video, community, reading, education. It's designed by pastors for pastors. It's Jeff in conjunction with other pastors who are communicating week after week. Upfront Digital that Jeff just referred to. Bonus is part of what's going to happen today. And also the 10 new preaching stories that you're going to be able to use immediately. That's all going to be part of what is brought to you today, and that's a $4,000 value. And I would ask this question: what's your weekend and what's your family life worth to you? Like, what if you could feel great about your upcoming sermon? What if you had more time with your kids, more time with your family, more time with your spouse because you had a plan, you had a clear plan? What if you could get your weekends back, or your Saturdays back, or your Saturday nights back? What if you were less stressed? What if you looked forward to Sunday? I know so many of you, oh man, you're dealing with the stress and burnout right now, and this preparation week after week process is a big part of that. What if there was a plan for that, and you started looking forward to Sunday again? If all this happened, would it be worth it? How much would you pay, for a coach, a plan, 12 months of training, community, strategy, practical help? I can see why it's a great deal at $4,038. But here's what I also know. You don't have $4,038 sitting around in your leadership development budget. Now, would you be willing to pay $4,000 so you didn't feel a sense of burnout, or you didn't feel like, there were times where you were thinking about quitting ministry altogether? Potentially, but I know right now you probably don't have that in your budget. So that's why you can get started today at $89 a month. You can jump in at $89 a month today. So you can click on the offer. We have an offer in the chat box, or you can go to preachbetternow.com. So you can leave this tab open and hit Control-T, or go File, New tab, and you can type preachbetternow.com in there, or like we said, we'll put it in the chat stream, and you get started immediately at $89 a month. And the thing I love about this, for you, that's 74% off. All the resources, all the value that we just talked about, that's 74% off to get these 4 incredible preaching resources. Again, you click on the offer, or you go to preachbetternow.com. Now you're saying, well, you only said there was 3. You only said there was 3 resources, 2 bonuses. Well, there's a fast action bonus that, as long as my voice, you can hear my voice, it's going to be available, and then it's going to go away when my voice goes away, and that's Sermon Craft. Sermon Craft, a $29 value. Jeff, very, very quickly, explain what Sermon Craft is.
Well, it helps you craft your sermon. And think of it as a notebook. You can basically take notes in, rough outlines, and it walks you through your next sermon. But I really believe, I love technology, but I actually believe in the old school of writing things out. So think of this as an artist crafting your message. And so this basically walks you through how to make your next sermon your best sermon, but it's just it's kind of on the back of the napkin, but it's over 26 weeks, so you basically carry and can get ahead further in your preparation. And so we just love basically you carrying around 26 weeks of your sermons that you're working on. So that's the Sermon Craft helps you do that.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I agree with you about a pen and paper and psychologically what it does differently. So let me summarize what you're going to get. Preaching Rocket, the 12 coaching modules we referred to, Upfront Digital, 10 new preaching stories, and then Sermon Craft that Jeff just talked about, $4,067 value. And again, today you can get started right now for just $89 a month. And that's 74% off these 4 resources to help you with your preaching this Sunday, to help you plan your preaching moving forward, to get coaching, training, community, accountability, all of that 74% off of what we would typically charge for that. And that's why we have an offer in the chat box for you to click on right now, or you can open another tab and go to preachbetternow.com. Because again, I don't want you to just walk away from a training and say, oh, that was a good idea. I want there to be just a visible difference in your preaching week after week. And we're going to find ourselves kind of saying the same old thing, making the same excuses, getting the same result as it comes to burnout and a feeling of frustration, or just feeling insecure instead of confident about our preaching. 74% off to make all of that go away when you jump in right now. So I promised that at the end of this, Jeff, that I would share the number 1 practical tip that I've learned, the number 1 habit I've established to help me self-evaluate. And so I'm going to share that right now, and it's simply this. I used to walk off of stage and just have feelings and intuitions, or just be aware of something that I did that I didn't like. For example, and I don't know if you've ever done this, Jeff, where I prayed my landing. Basically, when I was wrapping my talk, I realized when I prayed the closing prayer that I had forgotten some key points from my landing, and so I tried to work all of that into the closing prayer and prayed for a very long time.
Yeah.
giving like part C of my sermon. And, people, when you've transitioned to that closing prayer at the end of your sermon, most people are just thinking about what's happening next and where they're going to transition from there.
Right.
And so what I've done is I have a notepad in my phone, and it simply says this: something I've learned when I spoke. And so when I walk off stage, I will type in almost immediately something that I've learned. You mentioned today smiling. One time I walked off and was like, I just didn't smile very much. Even if I was saying stuff that was funny, I didn't smile. So I wrote down I need to smile more. There's been things about time cut, things about standing still, things about engaging, and again, speaking in the student realm, engaging with disruptive students too much, getting everybody off track, to making sarcastic comments, towards people, or the way I went up there without knowing what my first 3 or 4 sentences were going to be verbatim. And
Right.
so I write all those down as soon as the talk is over. And here's why. Instead of me just sitting in like emotional loathing and self-pity, or sitting there thinking, man, I'm kicking myself for this thing, I write it down so I have a practical step. So I have something that I practically learn. But the key is that before I go up to speak, anytime before I go up to preach, I read through that list. So that list is kind of the final mental checklist for things that I just need to keep in mind as I go up there. And again, I've prayed, I've prepared, I've gotten myself ready for the talk, and this is kind of the last little like, all right, these are some things to remember as you're up there communicating. So it's not just about learning to evaluate yourself as soon as the sermon is over in a very practical way. It is fuel for you to stay on track before you get up to communicate. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. And it's, you're kind of taking the pressure off. And the other thing is, one of the things I was taught early on is, at some point you have to release your words. You can't go back, or you can't pray part C of your message in, as you're talking about.
Yeah.
You can try, but hey, we're learning. That's why that's why we want to say, make your next sermon your best sermon. But hey, when you walk off the stage, guess what? You got a next sermon coming up too. So it's a process. So we want you to get better, but we also want you to not be your own worst critic.
Right. And hey, even communicators far better than me, communicators better than Jeff Henderson, they're still learning and still growing. So it's always a process of evaluating and getting better as a communicator. So again, I want to thank you guys for your time. I know we went a little long, but it was incredible seeing game film from you guys out there. Incredible communication. We're going to have Preach Better Now with the Sermon Craft Fast Action Bonus available for a little bit of time, but you got to move fast. That's preachbetternow.com, or we'll drop it in the chat stream as long as we're here for a little bit. But I know you guys are busy. You have stuff to do. If you can, before you leave, check out preachbetternow.com. And we're doing regular webinars and trainings just for free. So you guys stay tuned. Check those Rocket Company emails to see when upcoming webinars are. We're trying to talk about a variety of things with a variety of different voices, and we can't wait to just see you guys and interact with you at our next webinar. So thank you again for your time, and Jeff, thank you for your time as well.
Yeah, Ben, thank you. And if you guys want us to do this again, just email us, and we'll do some more game films.
Thanks, guys.